All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second Compute Over Data Working Group meeting. We are very fortunate to have Daniel from the Qubit 9 team and Parth from 180 Protocol. And today's agenda is going to be much deeper dive on each individual project, getting to know a little bit more about their use cases and a little bit of the designs as much as time allows. And then at the very tail end, David and I are going to come back with some updates about the website we're building for the community and a couple of other potential technology standards that we're seeing pop up as well. So Daniel, if you're ready, I'll hand it over to you and I'll let you share any materials that you like.
Great, thanks for inviting me. Not presenting today, I'm just going to verbally talk about what we're working on. Some of the things are a little bit undercover at the moment, and so we're still working on things in the background. Our goal is to take advantage of decentralized web services. And I say web services deliberately because we don't want to focus in one area where we say, oh, let's go Web3 or let's go pure blockchain. Let's go just storage. Let's go just, aggregated marketplace compute and things like this. So what we're aiming to do is fill that gap that enterprises are looking for in a cloud platform that is delivered and sold through distributed services. How distributed services look can take many different forms. You've got obviously blockchain solutions, you've got pure DApps, you've got classic architecture that you can aggregate together. There's a lot of orchestration that has to happen in the background, in the back end to make those things work and to make them work in harmony as well. And so one of the things we want to eventually do is have a cloud platform-like experience for developers and enterprises around the world. So it's touching on many different aspects. I'm certain we can't solve all of this, and we need to partner with a lot of people to bring the right solutions together and integrate things. But we are very, very determined to take advantage of decentralized compute around the world because the scale opportunities are immense. I'm a strong believer that four companies should not dictate how the internet operates either. So we have a very strong moral belief in this company that I've built here that we want to put that back with the people and align and build the internet the way it was originally intended to be, which was loosely coupled systems that solve problems, right? Our first launch product will be around decentralized object storage. And so the use case that we are aiming for is around like backup personas and developers. So looking at large enterprises that have massive data storage needs that are largely unchanged, and we want to offer some immutability to those backups so that they're protected against ransomware. Massive amounts of data can come in. We find that in backup scenarios, not much is restored, but when it is, it's needed immediately and it's needed fast. So building the scenarios around that and the use cases in our testing. Encryption, data anonymization, geo-fencing. These are all important things to our customers that we're focusing on as well. And certifying their backup software. So lots of backup software around the world offers S3 compatible backend storage mediums, and we're focusing on certifying those so that customers have a high guarantee that all of their scenarios will work. And obviously, if something doesn't, we'll engineer it so that it will. Starting with object storage and then expanding our portfolio over time when that starts to take off to look at other services that either complement that or even broaden the personas on the object storage. So thinking of object storage, then the next logical use case would be, a CDN on front of that, and then edge authentication and potentially some minor edge compute, looking at KVMs and things like that. So building the use case that makes sense for our customers based on what we're seeing as use and what the market's telling us is needed. Where we can integrate partners, and this is why this distributed CDN thing is super appealing and super interesting to me, is that how can we contribute to that so that we can help develop it, obviously, but we can also integrate it and offer that as our own network starts to expand and have these standards that we can all work to that makes that developer experience really easy and seamless, like having open standards. One of the goals that our CEO has written in our mission statement is an open standards platform is eventually what we want to have. So that amazing enterprise level developer experience, like something you'd expect from a Google or something like that, or an AWS, but it's easy to use so that we have not defined our own APIs, our own standards, our own ways of doing things, that we've collaborated with a lot of people to help evolve the new standards in the Web3 and decentralized world. So that's one of our goals. We want to play nice and contribute and give back in this arena. So we're looking to launch hopefully soon enough. I can't give away details yet because that's my product manager's role. But we've been working on this for the last 6 months. We are definitely well into our testing phases with beta phases and testing with customers. All the use cases work, they're fantastic, and we just need to make the product richer and more resilient. And then we're building out our own infrastructure, like the central infrastructure part that coordinates the jobs and orchestrates the jobs. And then we'll focus on growing our Web3 node network and things like that in the future, and integrating future services. My background, just in case anyone's wondering why I'm here doing this, was with Mesosphere, Apache Mesos, and Day2IQ Kubernetes. I think, David, you know a bunch of people over there. And before that, I was at Iron Mountain as the Global Director of Cloud Services, storing a lot of customer data in about 14 physical and 5 virtual data centers around the world, where we were custodians of customers' data. And so we had really tight regulations around banking and insurance information there. We had to put governance on top of these documents, and we had to extract information from the documents and present it back to customers in a digital form. So offering value add to that, and we build a governance system around that around the world as well. And so that relates really well to being good data custodians of customers' data, distributing that around the world, understanding how secure these things need to be, plus all of the distributed compute experience I built up in almost 5 years at Day2IQ, and now bringing all of that into Qubit 9 here with the founders and building new solutions around these types of concepts. So yeah, that's what we're doing here. Any questions or feedback? I'd love to hear from
Daniel. For those that aren't aware, Daniel is so underplaying what he did. Like the level of scale and work they did at Mesos and D2IQ was outstanding. So we couldn't be happier to have him part of the community.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's great to be part of this community, honestly.
Very good. Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate it. We'll stay close as the roadmap develops, and we'll keep the community abreast of any changes.
Thank you.
So we can shift into the 180-degree protocol folks. I know we've got Phil and Parth on the line. We can hand it over to you guys and let you take it from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Daniel, for the amazing presentation. Thank you. I'm going to just start sharing my screen. I have a short pitch deck, and then I have a demo as well. So I'm just going to carry forward with those. So just let me know when you guys can see the screen. I am assuming. Great, awesome. Great, so it's a pleasure to be presenting to you guys. We've talked to some of you before, but for those we haven't, we are 180 protocol. We are unlocking the value in sensitive data assets. We're all about privacy and introducing privacy and making a huge swath of data that's underutilized usable. Just moving forward. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that there is a vast amount of data that is produced every day by enterprises and users alike that is lost and is underutilized. Data is created, consumed, and stored at an alarming rate that is increasing. But the cost of keeping this data and processing and computing over this data keeps on going up. So there's fundamentally a need for compute that is cheap and scalable. Another facet of this problem is that privacy is one of the key factors that prevents enterprises from sharing their data. Privacy concerns around sensitive data assets, fear of exposing trade secrets, and simply a lack of knowledge that the sensitive data that enterprises have and even consumers is of use to anyone. So the problem is manifold. There's the infrastructure problem around storage costs and those going up, but there's also the coordination and the trade costs that there are not these privacy tools that allow for sensitive data to be leveraged. So as you can see, the risk of data exploitation, the lack of incentives to share sensitive data, and difficulty in deploying this data keeps this data sort of underutilized. We are trying to solve that problem. And how we're solving it is through 3 components. So we are building on Filecoin. We use Filecoin as a storage layer Filecoin is relatively cheap compared to most of the major centralized cloud vendors, and it guarantees storage across space and time. On top of that, what we've built is a compute framework on sensitive data. We use something called hardware enclaves and trusted, which are basically black boxes that can take in encrypted data inputs from trusted actors, decrypt those data inputs, and run any kind of computation on it. We also have the notion of data unions, and this is more of an enterprise geared product, but we want to expand it out. In the previous slide, I mentioned that coordination and lack of awareness that sensitive data is required or needed by some counterparty is a big issue. And data unions, we think, can solve that problem, because with data unions, you can have a private permission network where you can incentivize the right kind of data sharing by codifying what is good and bad data sharing. And you can reward the actors that share the right kind of good quality data assets. You can also introduce controls around the data flows and governance around what schema structures of data are allowed to be computed on. So currently, we've already built out this product. The data union product we've built out using some foundational technologies. And what we've used is a private permission ledger called R3 Corda. We use that simply as an audit and trust layer to record decentralized workflows on the ledger. We use something called Conclave, which is another product that allows for interaction with hardware enclaves. And we're supporting other such messaging frameworks, namely Anjuna, which is another more flexible TE messaging framework. We use Filecoin, as I mentioned, as a storage layer, and we want other application builders to use our data union feeds as a way to empower and introduce new kinds of analytics hitherto impossible in their applications. However, this is not the stop of the journey. We got in touch with, we applied for a grant to Filecoin earlier in the year just to use Filecoin as a storage layer. But through that experience, we got in touch with some of the folks, including David, and we realized that the Bakelhau project is something that's ongoing, and there's a huge push towards adding value-added services in the whole ecosystem. And we, being proponents of privacy and privacy of data while it is in use, want to extend that functionality of the knowledge that we have about TEs, generally about privacy, to Bakelhau. So that's something that we're still, it's something that's in the concept phase, and we're trying to promote this. But we want to introduce private computation for Filecoin. Our vision is that if Filecoin storage providers have sensitive data assets that are encrypted and stored on them, then they should be able to run compute queries on encrypted data. Now, there are various ways to achieve that. You could have a hardware enclave, you could have homomorphic encryption, you could have something like differential privacy. So there's many different kinds of privacy techniques. And what we want to do is figure out what's the best one that works for the Filecoin network design. And hopefully that is something that will benefit the whole ecosystem, because this would unlock a huge new variety of use cases that were previously not possible. So to summarize, our offering can really, help the Filecoin network solve this problem of privacy and compute on data, on sensitive data while in use. And we think that we can add value. I quickly want to talk about some of the use cases that we think from our lens that are possible. So my co-founder, Phil, is on the call, and one of our other teammates are. Both of them helped me make the slide. And what we really wanted to get across in the slide is that we think of use cases for decentralized compute in a very different way, I think, for most people. I think one of the major things that was never possible, that's possible with decentralized compute, is the notion of decentralized marketplaces. And in any marketplace, you have the notion of a trade, an exchange of value. And the compute thus emanating from decentralized compute could power these commercial transactions that are truly decentralized. You could classify these use cases almost into pre-trade analytics that enable that transaction to occur, and post-trade analytics that occur based on the transaction actually happening. For pre-trade analytics, you could have buyers and sellers aggregating their supply and demand for assets and run compute queries to find the optimum match. You could have commercial discovery, you could optimize price discovery. And once you have a match based on this decentralized compute, you could actually even have exchange of goods natively happening without the need of a coordinating central actor. So I think the use cases we're thinking of are quite exciting. They're very commercially oriented, and we really want to bring these to life. That's our team. And we're all three very passionate individuals. I'm the technologist, Phil is the CEO, and Sarah is our intern. Finally, that's our team of advisors. And yeah, that's us. I'm going to stop presenting. I do have a demo, but I do realize that I've taken a lot of time. So I'm led by you guys if people have the appetite for that.
I think we'd love to see a demo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, go for it.
Great. So just to set the scene, the demo I'm going to show you is of that data union product that we have. So what I'm going to be presenting to you is I'm going to be simulating a decentralized network with 4 different entities on my local machine. There's a host entity that's responsible for running the enclave, the hardware enclave. There's 2 data providers and a data consumers. And in this use case, the data that's being shared is automotive sales data from 2 car manufacturers. And the consumer of the data is a market research firm that cannot access that data individually because it's sensitive data. And what it can do is pull the data from these individual car manufacturers, apply a transformation, and get the analytics. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again. Just bear with me for a second. Sorry for the scary terminal. So this is just to evidence that I'm running a Docker Compose process on my local machine. I've already done some configuration to set up a data union configuration. So I've defined roles. I've defined the schema of the data that's going to be processed. And this is all sort of configured for the network. I'm going to start now with the first data provider. So I'm logged into a front-end app that's open source that we've developed. It's simply querying the individual nodes that I've logged in as. So this is the screen for a data provider. What you have is rewards for data that you've shared over time that you've earned for sharing that sensitive data. You can manage the data that you've shared, and you can engage in governance around what schemas are possible or what kind of flow should be available. So I'm going to go to the data screen, and I'm going to select a data category. Right now, the coalition only has automotive data supported, but you could have many different data categories, each with their own unique schemas and unique transformations. So there's no limit to that. So I'm going to select that as the data provider. So this is the scope of the grant that we've been working on with Filecoin. We've added storage of encrypted data assets on Filecoin using the S3 API. So I'm going to select that as the storage type. I'm going to, at this time, generate a data encryption key. The data encryption key is generated, and it can be generated per unique data asset, or you can use the same one for multiple data assets. This data key itself is encrypted again by a key encryption key that's stored on an HSM. Currently, we support an integration with Azure HSM, but we want to actually find a Web3 alternative to that as well. So finally, I'm going to choose the appropriate file. So I already have this CSV that I've configured just to show you. It's not a big data set. It's a relatively small data set, but scaling out is something that we're working on. So just to show you the structure of the data, it's a simple CSV with data around sales for different car units across country, across average price and total sales. So I'm going to select the CSV, I'm going to submit it. At this point, the CSV is first encrypted and then actually uploaded onto Filecoin using the S3 API. I'm going to log out of here, and I'm going to log in as a second data provider, which is going to perform a very similar action. The UI looks very similar. Think of it as these 2 actors performing the same action sort of in an asynchronous way. So there's no need for this to be done at the same moment. Data providers can keep on updating their data directly via API, so they don't even need to use the GUI. We're API enabled. Finally, I'm going to select the second data asset. The schema of both the structure of both the files is the same, but the contents can vary. Finally, as the last step, I'm going to log in as the data consumer. So this is a pull first model, as you can imagine. Like the providers have to have published data assets that are already uploaded onto Filecoin, and the data consumer is basically able to query for those data assets at any given point of time. They themselves can also store the data output asset either on Filecoin or locally on their relational database. Going through the same step to generate an encryption key for the data output. And at this time, I'm going to store it on Filecoin. And at this time, I think the process should be done. So you can see that the host node is printing out certain log messages.
Amazing.
So it received the inputs from the first provider, from the second provider, and then it received a request from the consumer, and then it was able to apply the transformation and send out rewards to the data providers for sharing their data. At this stage, what I'll do is I'll refresh my screen, and you can see that the data consumer is able to see the output of the calculation. And if I click on this, it should actually download and show you the output. And voila. So you can see that the data consumer is able to see high-level analytics based on the input data. So it does not see individual car level sales. What it sees is aggregated sort of analytics per car model. So it's not seeing how, to what country each Model 3 was sold. It's seeing at an aggregate from each of the data providers what was the average price across all countries, and it's able to see the units sold and the total sales. So this can be a very powerful tool for market research firms, right? To get real data from data owners themselves. This is not the end of the flow. The advantage to the data consumer is that they're able to see the analytics, but for the data providers, what they actually get is rewards. So you may remember that the first screen when I logged in for the data provider was blank, but now you can see that there is actually a reward state that they own, which is basically weighing the data quality along 4 factors, which is the amount provided relative to the other data provider, the completeness in terms of how many columns are provided, uniqueness in terms of if the column values were different from the column values provided by the other data provider, and how frequently is the data updated. These are very suggestive, and our SDK actually allows for this to be changed. But yeah, this is sort of the end, that we're providing incentive and we're enabling data sharing. So I'm going to stop.
This is terrific stuff.
Great.
So you showed, like, I assume as you think about these data providers wanting to highlight their stuff, they can set the summarizations, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So our SDK has a interface that you can override, which sorry, I'm trying to stop.
No, that's fine.
And I'm struggling with it. Oh yeah, it's right there. Anyway, so to answer your question, they can easily configure just by overriding an interface what the aggregation mechanism is.
It's just a quick question. First of all, it looks great. Are there standards for this data in like a format that people have to upload to? Do you define that? Does the market, does their industry?
That's a very good question. And we provide the tools for them to define that. So there is a sort of a charter they have to set, which we call a configuration state, that they all have to agree on. And so the schema of the input and the output is predefined. And so you and I are manufacturers. We both know what the valuable data structure is, and we can have a feed that just sends out the data to the secure processing unit and computes the output.
Thanks. And looking at the feedback on the provider node, there was no quality reward. You tended to have quantity. Is there a way for the consumer to give quality feedback on the data they received, in case you've got like a malicious actor or someone just gave like really null fields or zeros and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a very accurate question, and one we've been asked by many different people. The answer is that initially, so for individual data shares, there's no way to know that, because inherently the whole premise is privacy. So the only time the data is decrypted and known is inside the hardware enclave. So you can have checks around null fields; those are easy, but you can't really value the commercial validity of the data. That is something. So to actually address that, what we want to build out is actually a weightage factor that is based on data shared over time. So with every share, if the data provider gets a score, over time, you can aggregate those scores and almost have an Uber-like rating for the data provider that is known to the whole community. And that is a self-policing mechanism for the data providers to act in a good way. If you have a bad rating as a data provider, why would anyone want to include you in the coalition? You would be kicked out, right? If you fell below a certain threshold.
Does the consumer know that before they attach the data? That's my question, right?
So the consumer has to have a expectation that the data that there could be like wrong or obfuscated data that is part of that aggregation, and there's no way for the consumer to go around that, because the whole premise is privacy and access to hitherto unavailable data.
Yeah, it's a difficult area to solve for.
Yeah.
If you're keeping it anonymous, right? I guess if you de-anonymize it, then you can say, okay, node X or node Y, provider X or Y is a bad actor. Let's take them out. But yeah, understood. All right, it's pretty cool. Like, it's really good.
So Daniel, sorry to weigh in here. We've separately experimented around self-optimizing regression models, which stem from whatever the transactional value is of the data sharing and data compute. But that's something that we're thinking about and developing. It's not something which is live, and it's something in the pipeline, really.
Yeah, I ask because I'm going to be facing the same problems. We've already identified this in our architecture. And I was hoping you came up with an interesting solve there that we could translate and apply to our arena. If I think of something, I'll come back to you as well.
Yeah, if you look at our, I think it's on our wiki, but there is a sort of a technical document which looks at this problem and suggests an initial solver for a regression-based model. So if you have a look at that and have any interest, we're very happy to pick it up with you.
Awesome, thank you.
Wonderful.
Sorry, go ahead, Wes.
No, I was just gonna wrap and say thank you so much for sharing. That was tremendous, guys.
Yeah, and it warms. It truly does warm my heart. Like, this is the kind of interaction and discussion that I want to like. This is why we started the group. It does bring up an interesting point. One thing that I think is so powerful about the idea of the working group is having the common repo, having the common website where people can talk about their use cases, their particular use cases, potentially even have demos and things like that. We want to make those pages yours, not to supplant your pages, but so when people are coming by and they want to like understand how to engage, or like, which of these solutions out here should I choose, it's all kind of together. One question I have for you is, are you already working with the estuary team formally? Like, and if so, or if not, we're happy to connect you. If so, like, love to simplify it or whatever we can do there.
We have access to them. So I have communicated with Brenda and I think one of the other people. So I have access to them. I'm on the ecosystem dev Slack channel. So
great.
Yeah.
Home run. There you go. The other thing that we should all work on is, really one of the things that, people look at things like IPFS and Filecoin, and they're like, well, this is great technology. Is it being used? And then, it's very, very easy to go to like Phil Fox or anything like that and see like how much space and things is out there. It might be interesting for us to work together on a shared dashboard or something like that. We don't have to reveal anyone's private information or anything you don't want, but like the extent to which we can say, hey, all of these groups together are interacting with 100 terabytes a month or something like that, just to give customers and clients or customers of yours, comfort in like, oh, okay, wow, I'm not the only one.
Great idea. I think maybe even a simple way to get started is, if you remember, of course you remember the early days of the CNCF map, like just
absolutely
what logo solves what area.
Absolutely right.
Right, like
absolutely.
Super simple one pager, and start there, and then start to break it out and get more detail for people who are interested.
Yeah, I'd love to like talk about how we lay that out. I want to be like I said, again, we're not the center point here. This is incredibly neutral. We should all come together. But like, I never want anyone to feel like again, even if you hear somebody else do a demo and it is directly in competition with you, it is my opinion there is no competition at this point, right? Our competition is Spark and Hadoop and whatever. Not that those are bad either, but it's just like that's the Web 1 and Web 2 worlds that are like approaching things in a very different way. And you know, I think that this is just a pie that we all grow. So I'm with you. I love the idea of a map. We should figure out exactly how this looks so no one feels like, oh, you're forcing me to trade off A versus B, or like somehow we're saying because these people over here have whatever private this, that's better than not private. I don't know if you have you all seen Juan's triangle, his thing?
No.
Oh, we should share it, Wes, after the call. We'll just share it in the channel. But it's basically this idea that like, you know, it's a modification of, you know, good, fast, cheap, pick two. Like it's similar, but for privacy and performance and security. I think those are the three.
Okay. Yeah,
but like you can only pick two. Like there's no picking three. You can get to the middle, but like then, oh, there it is. So yeah, a validation. So you can get to the middle, but that means you're losing some of each, right? And so it's just one of these things where it's a trade-off, and that these are things we want to surface to people who need to do stuff and let them choose.
Yeah. I mean, like simply, like, honestly, I think a bunch of people are going to be in the same squares at the start, and we should all be okay with that.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to learn from each other. I think there's enough space for us to be competitive partners and just challenge each other to be better, but help each other solve problems, because the market is huge enough for all of us, right? And like, if we're talking about incentivizing the network operators so that we have enough profit just to do what we need to do, there's enough there for everyone, right? And
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I'd be happy if our logo was next to 7 other logos that do the same thing. I'm not fussed about that. I think that's the way to get started.
Good.
Right.
Yes. So with that in mind, I think it's incredibly important for us to develop the structures and the patterns right now to help each other, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever it might be, like here's the public websites, or here's how we talk about our roadmap, or here's how we I don't know, have a consulting group that understands all of our technologies and can help customers decide if you don't want to take it on yourself, all those kind of things. There's all sorts of processes and structure that we can help set up as it makes sense. Again, going back to the CNCF world, you know, there were people could list themselves as service providers, right? That's kind of outside of what we are, and you know, all that kind of good stuff.
And I think that's how things like the first stacks started getting built.
Absolutely right.
Someone come in and say, okay, these 5 things are solving a use case. Let's go sell that across our organizations. And then people just say, yeah, this makes sense to me.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
okay. So we're about 9:40. Wes, did we have another demo, or like that was it? We had 2 demos today, or 2 discussions.
That's all
Okay.
for the demos today. And then if there was anything else, David, that we need to cover.
So the big thing is, like I said, we are doing a lot of bootstrapping here. We have our placeholder website. We will put it up. Please let us know what things. Wes will very aggressively move this into a public repo, so people can just do PRs or do whatever they like, and we'll have documentation on what to do around that. The second thing that I want to talk about is some standards, very, very lowercase standard, like subscript S standard, around common things that we might need. So one thing, you know, I'm very passionate about is, for example, WASM. And I think that it's going to be, you know, quite transformative, particularly in Web3. But we are thinking about what would it look like to have standards for how you interact with systems across the board, whether or not it's WASM or Docker or straight binaries or whatever it might be. One thing that we're talking about right now, like, for example, an example of this, one thing that we're talking about, is the idea of, like, for example, an invocation model, right? Like, what would it look like for you to execute against some backend? Could we have a, you know, like I said, lowercase s standard around that? That's something that we're thinking about right now. And when I say we, I don't mean like Protocol Labs. This is just a group of people. I've talked to several people in the community who were on the call from last time, informally. And, we'd love to talk about what a standard might look like for that, such that you could say, oh, today I was operating on provider A. I want to take that and execute against provider B because they have a different thing that I want, different part of the triangle that they specialize in. What might that look like? And so things like that. Any thoughts about something like that?
An alternative, maybe I need to combine A and B, right?
That too.
Right.
That too.
So I've been thinking about this myself. We will build our own CLI. We have to, we know that.
Absolutely.
Because we interact. But as part of that, any service we're building comes with an SDK. And then I started thinking broader, like a CDK, right? Like
Absolutely.
a cloud development kit.
Absolutely right.
And I think at that point, we could work together to contribute each other's parts to a collective cloud development kit.
Yep.
In a repo where say, hey, here's storage and I can contribute this, and this other provider can do their part on their storage, and this is all their command protocols and standards. And then someone else has got some like with path solution there, like I need to pull data from source X and Y and put it in this storage. And that's all there ready to consume in a standard that's defined by us, I guess you could say.
Yep. Yeah. So I couldn't agree more. And so I'm on the hook for a, thank you. I'm on the hook for starting to pull these together just into a single central artifact that everyone can contribute to. My request for all of you is nothing more than if you already have invocation specs, whatever they may be, could just be a CLI, could be some serialized format. I don't care what, but just think like I have this, a customer, a user wants to kick off some execution on my platform. What does that look like? I'm just collecting those in a single document, and then we can start joining together and say like, okay, well, we think here are all the various things. So pass them my way. Again, this will all take place in public, and we'll go from there.
On the WASM part, David, that's a very apt point. I think WebAssembly, I agree with you, is the de facto, it's a very cool name, right? Assembly for the web. I think it has immense traction, and even in the confidential computing space, the adoption of WebAssembly is growing. So I just posted a projects link on the chat. It's called Enarx, and they are actually trying to get WebAssembly based runtimes inside a enclave. So if you're the target for decentralized compute is WebAssembly, then the confidential computing piece also fits in over there very neatly.
Yep, totally agree. So we'll list all this in here. I'll share the document. It's just an outline form right now. You're all time boxed at no more than 1 minute to look at the thing, because that's the level of quality it's at right now. But we're trying to probe at all the edge cases, and at the start it's just collecting a bunch of other invocation models and so that we can be informed as we get to production. Any other questions or comments? Anything anyone can do, anyone needs help on that, would like to ask the group for?
The normal recruiting, as always. So, but this is not the one for it. Yeah.
Maybe we'll follow up with some other conversations on that thread, because I think we're all in the same boat there.
That's weird. I have no problem. I have like candidates out the door. They're all super highly qualified.
Ready to start tomorrow.
I just throw them away. They're holding up, the resumes are holding up the corner of my desk. All right. So sorry with that. Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, we can wrap it there. Parth, Daniel, Phil, thank you guys so much for sharing today. That was tremendous. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks, and more to come on the Slack channel. Please.
Thank you, everyone. Great to meet you all.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.